All right. Thanks everybody for joining me this morning on this lovely Friday here. So we'll go ahead and get started here. I'll assume that you can hear me. Um, so Jim C says, I'm getting the below error message when trying to hit the Tuskegee Golf System tag under the instruction arrow. Not really sure what's going on here. I haven't really. You'll want to contact support if you're having technical issues. They'll give you some steps that you can do. I haven't really heard of anyone else having an issue with that, so might be just kind of a random issue that's going on with your machine or something. They'll clear up shortly. So if you want to contact support, just go to support@topspeedgolf.com. You can email them, or you can submit a support ticket from the help and support page on the website. You can get to that by going to the bottom of the page and then clicking on help and support. So hopefully you can get that issue resolved, Jim. Sorry you're having trouble with that. So go ahead and get your questions on here. So we got one question to start with. The first one was kind of just some technical issues, it sounds like. So we'll go ahead and get started here with David H. It says, my two biggest swing flaws are I'm too steep and I tend to start my downswing with my upper body. My scores are okay, but inconsistent. Ball flight is a pull. I'm able to save it with good hand-eye coordination. I need your best drill that will help me get a better transition to my lower body. Thanks. So the best drill for getting a good weight shift and starting the downswing with the lower body or with the upper body is what's called the step drill. And you can find that step drill in many videos on the website. But in that step drill, what you're doing is you're starting out with your feet together and you're getting your weight shift going forward. As soon as you start this backswing going back, your feet are moving forward and you're timing that step with reaching the top of the swing. And then now, once you're here, now you've got pressure going into the ground here in your lead foot, and you can really turn and get your lower body working a lot better and lead with the lower body. So the step drill is a really, really good one for you. A great video on the website that has the step drill in it. One that I really like is the how to start the downswing video. So if you just search that video, just search the word downswing and you'll find that video, just one word. Just search the word downswing. It'll be the third result on there. At least the last time I checked it was. Be the third result down there. It'll have some yellow lettering in the thumbnail. You'll see in the thumbnail of the video, there'll be some yellow lettering that says how to start the downswing, all that stuff. That's the video that you want there. Clay demonstrates that step drill in there and shows you, exactly kind of the feelings and things that you want to have. So I highly recommend checking out that video, but you'll also want to make sure that you're shallowing out the club. If you're coming down steep, a lot of times it may be, you may get a good weight shift. You may get a good weight shift and get to your lead side, but if you're in this position, you've got to do that, to get that club to come back down and play. And that's what you're talking about. You're saving it with your hand-eye coordination. That's exactly what you're doing. You're going like that to get the club to shallow out late so that you can hit the ball well and save it, basically. You're making a compensation. So that's going to be the move course. Working on the move course, the tennis racket drill. That's another really good one. To help you get the club to shallow out. So I actually have a tennis racket here. This is from the move course. So the tennis racket drill, what you're doing is you're taking a tennis racket. You don't have to use a tennis racket. You can use a badminton racket or a ping pong paddle. You don't even have to use any of those. You can use a club if you want. This just makes it easier because at address, when we're at address with a club, when we're looking down, it's easy to see that club face is square. We can clearly see that the leading edge is pointing, it's perpendicular to our target. So that's square, right? But when that gets out in space, the club's got loft on it, and it's a little bit hard to tell if it's square or not, or where it's pointing, or if we're closing it, or if it's open or anything like that. So using this tennis racket is really, really helps you, gives you a very good visual of, is the club shallowing out and is it squaring earlier in the transition. So what you're doing with that tennis racket drill is you're going up to the top, and in the transition, as you're coming down the downswing, you are shallowing out this club and you're squaring that face earlier. So the shallowing of the club is this part, getting the strings to point up to the sky. And then the squaring of the face earlier is the turning of the handle and getting that Wilson, the strings to be pointing toward the camera here. So if you look at it from this angle, I'm going up the top and I'm coming down and I'm shallowing it out and I'm turning that handle so that I can square that club face earlier. Now this is an exaggeration, but that's what you're trying to do. And then from there, now I can really turn. If I scoot back, I can really turn into impact and have a square club face and have tons of forward shaft lean here. You can see I have tons of forward shaft lean as I'm coming into impact. So that's a really great drill to get those going. So using those two drills, the step drill to help you with the weight shift, and using that tennis racket drill, which can be found in the move course, just working through the move course in general is going to help you with that. So to find the move course, click on the house icon. That's going to take you to the home page. Scroll down to the Top Speed Golf System course progress. And I believe it's about probably halfway down or a third of the way down. You'll see the move course. You can click on that and get started working on there. But 1.3 from the move, that is the tennis racket drill. So Jim G says, how steep or shallow should the backswing be? If you have a shallow backswing, is it harder or easier to do the move? So that's a good question. There's actually a video in the move course where Clay talks about this. It's I think it's called how your backswing can help or hurt the move or something like that. But basically, you can have whatever backswing you want, and it can make no difference. But there are some instances where it can make a difference. Basically, you want to have the backswing that allows you to make the move the easiest possible. So here's some things that can make it difficult to make the move, or basically here's some things in your backswing that can make the move in the transition more difficult. So if you bring the club way inside, you're bringing this club way inside. So what I mean by that is this club head, see how it's kind of in line with my hands? If I bring that club way inside of my hands here, way inside, what's going to happen when I get up to the top of the club, you can have momentum that's going in that direction. So if I bring way inside, now I have momentum that's kind of going in that direction. And that direction is the opposite of what I want to do to get the club to shallow out. So it can be more difficult to get the club to shallow out if you are going like that. But it doesn't mean that it's impossible. If you look at, there's actually in that video that I'm talking about from the move course, you can clearly see JB Holmes. He brings that club way inside and still shallows it up. He basically brings that club like this, and then he shallows it out in the downswing. So it doesn't mean that you can't still do the move. It just means that there's going to be kind of forces working against you, and you're going to have to, actively try to get that club most likely to shallow out in order to get it in the right position. Now, if you bring it too much outside the hands, you can bring it here, and it can actually make it a little bit easier to shallow out, because now the momentum, if I bring it more outside the hands like a Ricky Fowler or a Jason Day, I'm bringing it out like this. That makes it a little bit easier for the club to shallow out because the momentum's moving in that direction. So it's really, I tell people, use whatever backswing is most comfortable for you, whether it's inside the hands, outside the hands, in line with the hands. They're all completely fine. But if you're trying to do the move and you can clearly see you bring the club way inside, you can clearly see that there's momentum at the top of the swing that's bringing this club to come over the top and making it impossible to shallow, then you may want to think about changing up your backswing a little bit to make it easier. Or if you're really having trouble getting this club to shallow and you're looking for a little bit easier of a way, maybe to get some momentum, some forces moving in your favor to make it easier to shallow, you may want to think about bringing the club a little bit more outside the hands to make it easier to shallow. But that doesn't mean that it's going to work. You can do this and you still may have trouble with it. And that's usually the case in what happens there. So, give it a try. Everybody's a little bit different. Everybody's built different. JB Holmes brings the club way inside, shallows it up. Ricky Fowler, Jason Day, they bring the club outside the hands and it shallows out just fine. Guys like Rory McIlroy, Adam Scott, they bring the club right up on plane, or just in line with the hands, and they get the club to shallow out from the top. So everybody's got different ways that they bring the club up. You just got to find the way that works the best for you. So that's why the takeaway isn't a part of the Top Speed Golf system. The only thing about the takeaway that we really want you to do is, one, get a wide takeaway, meaning we don't want you just bringing the club up like this. We want you getting a nice wide takeaway. And the reason for that is so you can get your shoulders moving sooner in the swing. So if you watch here, if I just pick up the club, my shoulders haven't really moved much at all. But if I bring that club, if I have a later wrist set, get a wider takeaway, and get that club parallel to the ground, look how much more my shoulders have turned. So that's going to make it a lot easier for me to get a full shoulder turn. And that full shoulder turn is very, very important for power to be able to get distance and club head speed. So that's why we talk about that. Also, a later wrist set makes it a little bit easier to generate some lag in the downswing. If you're an early wrist setter, a lot of times you may cast in the downswing. So the reason why a later wrist set helps you get lag is because later in the swing, you've got more momentum with the club head moving in the opposite direction, which is going to make it easier to get lag. So watch, if I set the club early and now I'm like this, I don't have as much momentum going there. So if I set it later and then go like that, now I have a lot more momentum moving in that direction, making it easier to get lag. So that's really the only thing in the takeaway that we really emphasize. But the takeaway can make a difference in your downswing. So everything that you do has to be to improve what's going on at impact. So I wouldn't get too caught up in what's going on with your takeaway. But if you can look at your takeaway and make a little bit of a change and it clearly helps your impact, then I'm all for that. That's fantastic, because usually the takeaway is a fairly easy thing to change because it's happening at a much slower point in the golf swing. You can actually think about it and make the adjustment. And it can happen very, very quickly. So I'm for stuff like that. That makes they're a lot easier to change. Things in the backswing are typically a lot easier to change, but unfortunately, things in the backswing don't typically make the biggest differences in what's happening at impact. It's usually where you're going from in the transition and into impact that make the most difference at impact. So we get some more questions on there. We don't have any more questions from what I can tell on here. So get your questions posted on here, and I'll get them answered for you. Again, more questions about the move, ball striking masterclass, and so on. All right, thanks everybody for a couple questions here real quick. All right, so Jim G says, when you were working on the swing change like the move, which you said may take months to get, which swing do you play around with, especially very early on the swing change process? Your old swing that works or your new swing that you don't trust yet? So that's a very, very good question. So whenever you're going through swing changes, you want to have your practice tee, what I call your practice tee, and the first tee separate. You don't want to be going out to the golf course with the change that you're trying to, with the swing that you're trying to change to. Go out there when you're playing golf and play with the swing that you're confident in, that you know how to get the club on the ball with. The most important thing is impact. So initially, when you're learning something, when you're trying to change something and do the move, for example, your body doesn't know how to move that way and hit the golf ball yet. So your impact is going to suffer quite a bit at first, especially in the beginning. You're just going to be in practice swing phase of it. So until you get to where you're comfortable with it and you're making solid contact and you're comfortable with it, then and you're confident in it, then you can't really take it out to the course yet. So go out there, and whatever you're doing in your practice, it just has to subconsciously make its way out on the course. So the reason for that is if you are thinking about, for instance, trying to get the move working, things like that, a lot of your focus is going to need to be going to that. And that's going to take away focus that you need to hit the golf ball, and your contact is really, really going to suffer. So really, really focus on your contact. What we call the big four in the ball striking masterclass, which is center face, hitting it on the center of the face, your strike location. That's going to be your face angle. It's going to be your club path, And then it's going to be your ground interaction, where you're striking the ball in relationship to the ground. Obviously, you want that ball first contact. Really focus on those when you're out on the course, because those are really the most important things that allow you to hit the ball well. If you're thinking internally too much, and especially if it's something that's new that you're not comfortable with and you don't quite know how to do yet, you haven't trained yourself to do yet, you're not likely going to have the very good results. You may go out there and hit some really great shots, but you're probably going to hit a lot of bad ones, and it's going to be very, very frustrating. So focus on your contact when you're out there playing. Focus on scoring. Focus on just playing. Being confident in the swing that you have, and then when you go practice, that's a complete different thing. When you go practice, there's no when you're on the range, there's no penalty for hitting a bad shot. That's just part of the failures are part of the process of improving. So take that in mind. There's a great video on the website where Clay talks about how to play when you're going through swing changes. It goes over a lot of what I just said, but if you just search the words "how to play," and that video will come up there. So check that out if you want more information on that. All right, so Leland, sorry, it keeps bumping it down on me every time my question comes in. All right, so Leland H says, one of the best things I did for my game was make a yardage book, which I know the distances. I know the distances for each club in my bag. I do this for half shots and full shots, and also have a chart on Rule 12 for chipping around the greens. This keeps me focused on what I need to hit. Great. Thanks, Leland, for sharing. Yeah, that can definitely be very, very helpful to create something like that. I'm typically a person that I basically just kind of memorize things and have a feel for it. But everybody's a little bit different. If you feel, some people want to write things down and know exactly, see it on paper, maybe more of a visual, a picture type of learner, and you can kind of remember things a lot easier if you write it down and see all the yardages and know all your half swing shots and full swing shots and things like that. But typically, I have a good feel for it, and I just kind of memorize it for the most part. But everybody's a little bit different, and that can definitely help a lot of people for sure if they want to give it a try. If they're having trouble with understanding how far they hit the clubs and the distance control, especially on those half shots versus full shots versus 3/4 shots and things of that nature. So thanks for sharing, Leland. I think a lot of people could benefit from that for sure. So John G says, Quentin, is it better to start the backswing with a turn of the shoulders or core muscles? Which would be more consistent? Thanks. You're using both your core muscles and your shoulders. When you are basically, your core muscles are a stabilizer, right? So you're stabilizing your body with your core muscles, whether you kind of feel it or not. You're stabilizing your body with your core muscles as you're turning up to the top. So it's going to be more, you're probably going to feel more shoulders, but yeah, it's going to definitely be your core muscles are being used as well. So it's just both. Charles S says, Q, when I shift my weight back to the left foot, I don't feel like I'm getting my left hip open enough and I slide. Suggestions, please. So it's really hard to say exactly what's going on without seeing your swing. But a lot of times people who don't open their hips, it's because they're coming down steep in the downswing. And what happens is they come down steep in the downswing. So we have to stand up to get this club to come back down plane and to raise the hands up. And when that happens, we don't rotate the hips. We typically move the hips kind of toward the target and toward the ball. We kind of tend to do that a little bit of thrust motion. So instead, we want to get this club shallowing out so that this club's already basically on plane. And now I can stay in my posture and turn through impact and get my hips to open up. So that's what I would look at first, is to make sure that you're shallowing out the club. Most likely you're not. So to look at that, film your swing from down the line and see where that butt end of the club is pointing. Pause it about right here. Lead arm parallel to the ground in the downswing, not in the backswing, but in the downswing. And draw a line from this butt end of the club all the way down to the ground and see where that's pointing in relationship to the golf ball. If it's the golf ball or anywhere inside the golf ball, you're coming down a little bit steep, and you're likely standing up a little bit. You can draw a line on the top of your head at that point and see if you stand up after that as you're coming down into the ball. You should actually stay pretty level from there, or even get a little bit lower from there in the downswing. So most likely you're probably coming down steep, and that's the big reason for it. Now, if you are shallowing out the club, then it probably has a lot to do with the way that you square up the club, which is going to be you are coming into impact and you're really throwing that trail hand at it and trying to power it through with that trail hand, and you're not covering the ball. You've probably seen, or you may have seen that recent video, I think it was last week it came out, where Clay talked about 3 must-do with the irons. He talked a lot about covering the ball and things like that. It's a very, very popular video. We got a lot of great response from people in that video. I think it turned on a lot of light bulbs for a lot of people. But that might be a great video for you to watch as well, for how you're squaring up the club face. Because you may be coming into impact and squaring up the club face, no forward shaft lean, and really powering through with that trail hand. But what you want to do is you want to turn that handle down so that you can get forward shaft lean and a square club face at impact. So all of that I just mentioned, that's the move course. You probably just need to go work on the move course and get that working a little bit better. Now, if it is purely just hips that are the issue, I'll be working through the compression line course and get that, because what's happening is you're just bumping the hip out forward. So there's a great drill in the compression line course where you can stick a alignment stick in the ground right outside your hip, and you can do some practice swings. You can actually even angle it in too. You stick it in the ground, angle it in, and actually make sure that you don't hit that stick as you're coming through, because if you slide, you'll hit that stick. So that's a great drill to do as well, and that's from the compression line section. So most likely you need to work on the move, shallowing out the club, getting that face squared by turning that handle down so you can get forward shaft lean and rotate the body open. Or it could just be where you're just sliding the hips, and you may be having to do that because you have to compensate because the hips are sliding. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation, but either way, if you work on either one of those, I would start with the move first. And if you're doing the move and you're still sliding the hips and everything, then I'd maybe look at the compression line section and work through some of those drills. All right, so Dwayne J says, when chipping, how important is a straight left wrist at finish? I notice my wrist is cupping. It's pretty important because if I'm chipping, it's really, really important for forward shaft lean, and also to be able to get that ball first and kind of shallow contact. So if I'm coming into contact here, this would be a good chipping technique where I'm coming in and I'm keeping everything kind of flat, and I'm brushing the turf as I'm coming through here, and I'm letting the loft of the club do the work for me, and that's going to allow me to get that. Now, if I come in and I do some of this action where I cup that lead wrist, well, what's happening is that club is going to come in, and you're going to be susceptible to blading it because the club's going to come in way too level with the turf, or might even be moving up into the golf ball, which is a bad thing to do when you're hitting shots off the turf, because you're going to tend to blade and chunk a lot of shots. The other thing is you're going to hit a lot of thin shots as well. So, yeah, it's very, very important to have that lead wrist kind of nice and flat and solid through there. So you just trust the loft of the club as you're coming through there. You don't need a lot of speed. You don't need extra loft when you're chipping. If you need extra loft, then use a club with more loft on it. You know, if you're hitting an 8-iron, chipping with an 8-iron, and you need more loft, use a 9-iron or a pitching wedge or a wedge or something like that. Don't try to add more loft by flipping the club through, because that's going to lead to disaster. You're going to end up blading, thinning, chunking shots and things like that. So, yeah, very important to keep those wrists solid when chipping. Leland H says, what kind of release would be better to hold a shot for a baby fade? So when we're talking about the release, we're talking about the straight line release, and you're using the straight line release whether you're hitting a fade or you're hitting a draw. So when we're talking about the release, just to kind of define exactly what that is. Sorry, my nose is really itchy today. But when we're talking about the release, we're talking about when the club is splitting the forearm. So after contact, so here's contact, and then we're coming through, and that club is splitting the forearms there. So see how the club's splitting my forearm? This is the release. That release is going to be virtually the same whether you are hitting a fade or whether you're hitting a draw. So if you're trying to hit a baby fade, basically you just want the face just a little bit open to your club path. That's all you really need to happen. So the face would be the direction the club face is pointing at impact, and then the path would be the side-to-side movement of the club head as it's moving through impact. So if you want a fade that starts let's say it's a baby fade. It's like a little 3-yard fade, okay? So if you want a fade that starts 3 yards left of the target and then fades right back to the target, then you need to have the face slightly closed at impact so that it starts left, because the ball is always going to start mostly in the direction of the club face, and then it's going to curve away from your club path. So your face needs to be pointed 3 yards left of the target, and your swing needs to be in the direction that's 6 yards left of the target. And if you do that, it will start 3 yards left and then curve back to the right 3 yards. So that's kind of just getting into the numbers and basically what happens. But the release, the straight line release is the same whether you're hitting a fade or a draw. It's just a matter of how the face is oriented in relationship to your club path when you're striking. And that's all assuming center face contact. If you add that in there, if you hit a ball more on the heel, it's going to tend to want to start a little bit more to the left and fade to the right. If you hit it off the toe, it will tend to want to start a little bit more to the right and draw to the left for a right-handed golfer. So some people, if you just want to hit a little fairway finder, there's some people that will intentionally just hit it off the heel to get it, to start a little bit left and fade right into the fairway. Now, it won't go as far because it's a mishit. It's off center strike. But if you're wanting to hit a little fade, you can just hit it off the heel with a square club face and a square club path, and the ball will start a little bit left and fade to the right. But it won't go real far if you do that. So just keep that in mind. But if you're wanting to learn more about hitting draws and fades and things like that, I highly recommend doing our ball striking masterclass. We'll be opening spots for that in the next couple of weeks, so be on the lookout in your email for an opportunity to sign up for that. But the release is virtually the same. Now, if you want your face to be a little bit more open to the path, you may want to feel like you're holding off the face a little bit. So if you really roll the face over and close the face down, it's more likely that your club face is going to be closed to the club path, which is going to produce a hook, which we don't want if you're hitting a fade, right? So you may want to feel like you are holding the face off a little bit to have that face open so that you can hit, more of a fade type shot, have that face open to the path. Just something you want to go practice when you go out there. So give that a shot next time you go out. Try holding off the face a little bit and see if that helps you hit a little bit, make it a little bit easier to hit a fade. All right. So Jim G says, working on the move early on. I do slow motion and practice swings, and the plane is flatter. I feel the elbows pointing out, feel the doorknob turning. Then I take a full swing and I hit the ball. It feels like my swing is flatter. Then I look at the video. The swing is just as upright as it was before. Any suggestions? So it sounds like one thing to keep in mind here is just because you do something in a practice swing doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen when you hit the golf ball. You need to actually get to where you're doing it in your practice swing, and you're for sure doing it. You didn't mention that you looked at your practice swing. You may be doing the same thing in your practice swing as well. Get to where you're at your movements that have no regard with where the golf ball goes. Oh. So I'm not sure if I lost connection there. Hopefully you all still have me. It popped up and said that I lost connection, so hopefully you still got me. But basically, you need to have no regard. Don't be afraid of hitting a bad shot. So you got to be out of your comfort zone and just focus on the movement and the movement only. If you miss the golf ball, that's completely fine initially. Just try to do better on the next one. Try to do better every time that you do that. So, look at your practice swing. Make sure that you're able to get it in a practice swing first. I would actually try to make sure that you're doing it at full speed in a practice swing, and I would try to actually make sure that you're exaggerating it in your practice swing, because that's going to make it easier when you go to actually hit the golf ball. And then when you go to hit the golf ball, try to hit the golf ball and try to just by any means necessary, get the moves down. Even if you hit a poor shot, even if you shank it, even if you miss it, hit it way off the toe, chunk it. That's completely fine. Just make sure you get the movement down. And then once you get more comfortable with it, it'll be easier to hit the golf ball. So that's kind of the process that you want to go through with it. It almost never works out where you're going to be able to just do a couple practice swings and then just hit the ball perfectly and you're going to be able to do the motion and you're good. It doesn't work that way. You have to actually train yourself to do these movements, and it takes time and it takes repetition. And if you exaggerate it, it'll go a lot faster. So one thing to keep in mind is that I equate making these kinds of swing changes to learning how to type. Like you have to build the neural pathways to make that happen. So when you first started learning how to type, and people who have been on my office hours several times have probably heard this analogy because I probably say it a couple times a week. But essentially, when you are learning how to type, when the first time that you even see a keyboard or try to use it, you are pointing and pecking. You're trying to look at every single letter, and you don't know where any of them are. And then eventually, you start memorizing where all of them are, and you get better. But you're still pointing and pecking. And then you learn how to put your fingers on the keyboard properly, and you actually learn what each individual finger has to do. But again, it's going slow, and you make a lot of mistakes. You got backspace a lot. You make a lot of mistakes, and you're still going very slow. But eventually, you get faster and faster, and you get to where you don't have to look at the keyboard anymore. You can look at the screen, and then you get to where you're thinking in terms of words instead of individual letters. And then you get to where you're thinking in sentences instead of individual words, and you start typing a lot faster. Well, that takes a lot of time and repetition to be able to do that, and you're still going to make mistakes along the way. So that's what making a swing change is like, especially one that's happening in the downswing. When in the backswing, things are a lot slower, so it's easier to do. But in the downswing, when things are a lot faster and it's an intuitive thing that you have to do, then it takes the kind of time like it does to learn how to type. So if you look at it that way, it makes it a lot easier to understand, that it's not just going to take going to a range session to, one time to be able to do that. It's going to take a lot of range sessions. And if you do it every day, the better you're going to get at it. So that's why I recommend do the practice reps. The practice swing reps, get to where you can actually do it in an exaggerated state in a practice rep at full speed. And then once you can do that, then try it with the golf ball and have no regards for where the golf ball goes at first. That will get better. Just try to really focus on getting the movement down. Now, if you just can't get it out of your mind, like it's way too far out of your comfort zone to hit the golf ball bad and still perform this move, well, then you'll want to transition to the golf ball. So a way you can transition to the golf ball is instead of hitting the golf ball, you can just hit something that isn't a golf ball, like a tee off the ground, clip a tee or hit a piece of paper or a leaf. Because when you do that, it takes away that hit impulse a little bit. Because when we see the golf ball, in our mind, we're ingrained that we want to hit that, especially if you've been playing golf for a long time, it's going to be harder for you. I'll tell you that. Because you are ingrained to hit the ball good. Like you've ingrained your swing. You know how to hit the golf ball good as well as you can with your current swing. So it's hard for you to get out of that comfort zone to try to hit the ball bad with a swing that you don't know how to do. So you have to kind of let that go and just try to get the movement down and trust over time that it will help. But when that golf ball is there, we get that hit impulse, and we want to hit it in the center of the club face. We want to hit it with a square club face. We want to hit it with a neutral club path. We want to hit the ball first contact. We want to hit it with speed. All those things happen, and those focuses take away from the movement, and it's really, really hard to perform the movement. So if you can't block out all those things initially, then I would try just hitting a piece of paper off the ground, like a crumpled up piece of paper, or a tee, clipping a tee, or a leaf or something like that. because that kind of takes away that hit impulse a little bit, because you can hit that paper or that tee as hard as you possibly can, but they ain't going anywhere. You can hit it with a slightly square or open or, you know, whatever kind of club face, closed or open club face, and it doesn't matter if it goes left or right. You know, these things don't matter as much, so that hit impulse goes away a little bit. So that's one way that you can kind of transition. So get to where you can do it in an exaggerated full speed state with a piece of paper or a tee, and then try to graduate to the golf ball. And when you go to the golf ball, again, you want to have no regard for where the golf ball goes initially. Literally, don't care if you miss the golf ball. We just want to get to where we're getting used to hitting at something and performing the action, and it will get better and better as you work with it. So it's probably not what everyone wants to hear. Everyone probably wants to hear that making swing changes is easy and you just go to the range a couple times and, you know, you're going to nail the move just like that, and you're going to have forward shaft lean and compression. It just does not work that way, unfortunately. You probably noticed, you know, going through the Toss Speed Golf system, we don't just tell you to do 10, 15 reps here, 10, 15 reps there. It's 1,000 and 3,000 reps. And that's because that's literally the amount of time and repetition that it usually takes to get these things to where they're second nature. You want to get to where it actually feels weird to do what you used to do. So that's basically what it comes down to. You just got to beat it in for the most part. It takes a lot of hard work and time and repetition. It's not for everyone. You know, not everyone is up for that. But if you really want to improve and, you know, by means of changing your technique, then that's what's necessary. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully I didn't scare you away from working on the move or anything like that. But that's just basically what it takes. Try to get a little bit better every time you work on it. Understand it's a process. Enjoy the journey and get after it. All right. So Nelson R. Nelson R says, please review the swing sequence of the body. I seem to start my downswing with, and then it stopped there. So as far as how the downswing starts, the easiest way to think about it is it starts from the ground up. So first of all, you want to make sure that you're getting a good weight shift to your lead side. Most people either shift their weight way too late, or they don't really shift it at all. They kind of stay on their back foot, and then the arms kind of swinging through the momentum of their arms kind of bring them up and around. You've got to get your momentum shifting to your lead side before the end of your backswing. So what that means is as you're going up to the top here, as you get to about right here, you should start to have some momentum moving this way. So that way, when you're ready to start this downswing, now you've got some pressure going into this lead foot, and now you can really use that to rotate the body and get that swing sequence started. So like I said, it starts from the ground up. It starts from you putting pressure into the ground with your lead foot. That's going to help you to rotate your hips. The hips rotating, rotate your torso. Your torso rotating, rotates your shoulders. Your shoulders rotating, coming down, brings the arms down. The arms coming down, bring the hands down. And the hands coming down, bring the club down. So that's the sequence. It has to happen in that sequence to have the most amount of efficiency. Now, it can happen in another sequence. You can have it to where, you know, your arms kind of start down first and then your hips and things like that. You can play golf doing that, and a lot of people do. Most amateurs probably do. But it's not the most efficient way to hit the golf ball. You're going to have trouble getting forward shaft lean and compression on the golf ball. You're going to have trouble getting that club to be in the right place, and you're going to have trouble getting speed and power and things like that. So that's the proper sequence. If you're looking for a great drill to work on that, the step drill is a really good one. There's a video on the website. It actually pertains almost exactly to what you're asking. It's called How to Start the Downswing. Just search the word downswing on the website. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a little search window. Search the word downswing, and in the search results, you'll get some videos there. It's the third one down. It's called How to Start the Downswing. It's got some yellow lettering in the thumbnail. That's the one that you want if it's kind of changed the order. But that's the one you want, is that How to Start the Downswing video. So watch that video, do the step drill, and that should help you out quite a bit to get you working a little bit better shape with your downswing. So John A says, is there a drill to help me transfer my weight forward? I have a tendency to keep my weight back, causing me to hit behind the ball. John A, that drill that I just mentioned, the step drill, that's the number one drill for working on that. That's the best one. If you're having trouble and you're hitting behind the ball a lot, there's also a great course on the website, the Stop Chunking and Topping course. Clay also does the step drill in that course. But that one that the video that I'm talking about is the one that I really like the demonstration the best in. So John A, check out that Stop Chunking and Topping course. To get to the courses, click on the house icon, and that's going to take you to the home page. When you scroll down the home page, you'll see Top Speed Golf System course progress. All of the courses are listed right there. The Stop Chunking and Topping course is in there. Work your way through that course, and that will help you get rid of the chunking that you're talking about, hitting behind the ball. All right. So Mark T says, is it best to close the club face on the downswing halfway or 3/4 of the way or 3/4 down in pack? I'm not really sure exactly what you're asking. Is it best to close the club face on the downswing halfway or 3/4 down to in? I don't understand the last part, to in pack. But anyway, where you do it is completely, it's up to you. It only matters if it's that way at impact. It only matters if it's square at impact. Now, what I find to be the easiest for me and for most people, and this is what we kind of teach in the move, is in that transition. So you're here, you're coming down, you're in that transition. This is where you're squaring up the club face. That's where I'm turning this handle to square that up. So that's the tennis racket drill that I talked about earlier. That's the easiest way. Now, there are a lot of people that do it in the backswing. So you're talking about Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka kind of does it to a certain extent. John Ram, Daniel Berger. There's some golfers out there, great golfers, by the way. These are top, 10 players in the world other than Daniel Berger that are doing that. So what I'm talking about there is you're going up that top swing in the backswing, and you're actually getting to this point at the top of the swing. Now, for me, I can't do that. It hurts my wrist. I actually hurt my wrist a little bit right there doing it. I heard it pop. So for me, I can't do that. I have to do it. It's easier for me to kind of do it in that transition area. And that's the way that we kind of teach most people to do it. But that's when you want to do it in that beginning of the downswing. Get that club face squaring earlier so that you can continue to rotate. And basically, you're rotating and you're essentially squaring the club face with your body. That's kind of the feeling that you want to have as you're coming into impact. So not sure if that exactly answered your question, but that's what you want to do. I didn't quite understand the two in pack part at the end. So David W says, when you post up, does your left side stop or just slow down? Well, I mean, it's going to eventually stop. I mean, you can't just keep spinning around and round, right? So when you come around and you're posted up here, your left side is stopped. But from the beginning of the downswing is when your hips are starting to turn. That's when they're fastest. And then you basically get to a point to where they actually start slowing down. But what you want to feel like is that they're continuing to accelerate forward. But the reality is that they are slowing down until they come into a stop when you're in the full finish position. So Chris B says, since starting top speed, my straight line release is not at the ideal angle, but it definitely a lot better. That's great to hear. That's one thing to understand. It's a work in progress. Every little bit helps. You're not going to go from releasing the club 10 degrees out in front to releasing the club 45 degrees out in front like that. It's going to happen. Maybe you're releasing the club 10 degrees out in front, and then you get to where it's 15. And then maybe you get to where it's 20, 25. Then you get to where it's 30. You progress there. But if you keep making small improvements over time, it'll add up to a big improvement. So anyway, he said, I'm at a loss of how to open the hips and let the release happen further out. I am getting my hips and or shoulders stuck somehow. So most of the time, it's hard to say without seeing your swing, Chris, but almost every time, the reason why people can't open their hips is because they're coming down steep in the downswing with the club. And what that means and I went over this earlier in the office hours, is that means that when you're coming down, this club is more in a vertical position. And in order to get this club to come back down on plane and to hit a good shot, we have to basically early extend and to drop this club down and to bring our hands up and to drop this club down to get it to come back down on plane. And when you do that, when you kind of stand up, come out of your posture, the energy in your legs is going toward doing that instead of rotating the body open. So what happens is you kind of do this action. It's going to be that action there where you're releasing that club early because you're standing up out of it. So you probably just need to work on the move. To get to the move course, click on the house icon. That's going to bring you to the homepage. Scroll down to the Top Speed Golf System course progress. It's about a third of the way down. You'll see the move course. Start working through the drills there. And what you're doing in the move is you're shallowing out the club. So that's doing this with the club in the downswing. So you're here, and now I'm shallowing out the club. So you're shallowing out the club, and then you're squaring up the face earlier so that you can rotate into impact with a square club face and forward shaft lean. And the straight line release is basically just a result of getting that forward shaft lean. So that's why I'd be working through. Start working through the move course, and that's going to help you to open up the body. It's going to help you to get the club shallowed out. It's going to help you to get some forward shaft lean and get that club to release out in front. All right, so go ahead and got your questions on there. We got about 13 minutes left. Then it's the start of the weekend. So go ahead and get your questions on there. 13 minutes left here, and we will get them answered. If not, you get to watch me check my email for 10 minutes or 12 minutes, which I'm sure is no fun for anyone. So get your questions on there, and I'll get them answered for you the best I can. So John C. says how to compress the ball. So the way to compress the ball is to de-loft the face. That's the best way to compress the ball. So what that would mean is, let me get back to there we go. So what that would mean is if I'm going into impact like this, no forward shaft lean, shaft is straight up and down. If I really want to compress the ball and almost hit it like a sledgehammer, which has no loft on it, right? I have to get forward shaft lean so that I can take loft off this face and hit the ball with more compression. So that comes mostly from doing the move. If you are looking to get forward shaft lean, the move is almost always going to be the main thing for you that's going to help, because those are two big things to help you to get more forward shaft lean. Because if you are coming down steep in the downswing, you're typically going to stand up. And when you stand up to get that club to come back down on plane, that brings your hands up further away from the golf ball, and you have to flip the club to get to it. So the other bad part about that is that trains your hands to square up the club face by doing this, by pushing through, because it has to. You have to do that to square up the face when you don't get forward shaft lean. So you may be getting to where you're able to shallow out the club, but then at that point, you have to train your hands to square up the club face when they have forward shaft lean. Your hands don't know how to do that, and that's what the move is. So the way to get to where you can compress the ball, that's working through the move course, because that's going to get you to where you're shallowing out the club so that you don't have to make compensations in the downswing to get that club to work down on plane. You'll be able to stay in your posture, which allows you to bring your hands nice and low through impact, which is essential for getting forward shaft lean and compressing the ball. And then it's also going to teach you how to square up the club face when you have forward shaft lean. So when you come into impact, you don't have forward shaft lean, your wrist angles, lead wrist is broken down, trail wrist is usually in a flat position. So square club face, no forward shaft lean. If I were to keep these wrist angles the same and then push my hands forward with forward shaft lean, look what happens to the face. It's wide open here now. So what I have to do is I have to turn this handle down, which now look at my wrist positions. Trail wrist is in a bent back position. Lead wrist is in a flat position. Now I have forward shaft lean and a square club face. And that's what the move teaches you to do. It teaches you to shallow out the club so that you can stay in your posture, get those hands really low, essential for forward shaft lean. And it teaches you to square up the club face from that position. Because if you don't, If you just get forward shaftly and you don't change the wrist angles and you don't turn that handle down, that club face is going to be wide open. You're going to hit the ball a mile to the right if you're a right-handed golfer. So if you're looking to compress the ball, the move is most likely going to be the best thing for you to start working through that. So give that a try. Go to the move course, click on the house icon, scroll down. That's going to take you to the home page, and then scroll down to Totsby Golf System course progress. Scroll down about halfway down on those courses, and I believe or a third of the way down, the move course is going to be right there. Click on that. Start working through those drills. Starting with 1.1, start working through them. So Shane L says, I am guilty of early extension. Which videos should help correct this? So the move, what I just talked about, is one of them. And also we have a stop early extension course that you can work through as well. So go to the house icon, click on that. That's going to take you to the home page. Scroll down to the Totsby Golf System course progress. Go to the move, work through those drills. Go to the stop early extension, work through those drills. Those are going to really help for early extension for sure. Stephen B says, I see a ton of players whose practice swing looks much better than the actual swing. Why is that, and what is the fix? So the reason is that when you are doing a practice swing, you are only focused on the movement, and there's no hit impulse exactly. So you're just focused on the movement, and which makes it a lot easier to do. When you add the golf ball there, now you're focused on the golf ball, and you're not focused on so much the movement. You're just focused on the golf ball and what you need to do with that golf ball. And you're focused on hitting, not only just hitting the golf ball, but hitting it on the center of the face, hitting it with speed, hitting it with a square club face, hitting it with a club path that's right, hitting the ball before the ground. You're focused on all of these things, which you absolutely should be. So you move your body intuitively to make that happen. But when you are taking a practice swing, that impulse isn't there. That intuitive impulse isn't there, that hit impulse. So you move your body in the way that you feel like you're supposed to be able to do to hit the golf ball. So the way to get over that is to, one, when you look at your swing, your practice swing, most likely what you're going to see, and this is what I see all the time, people, especially people who struggle with forward shaft lean. So I'll see people who come in with their swing and they have no forward shaft lean, square club face at impact. But then when they take that practice swing, they got tons of forward shaft lean. But one thing that you'll notice when they do that is that club face is wide open. It's wide open. It's pointed way out to the right. And sometimes it's hard to see because the club head's moving fast, but you can also look at your wrist. So the back of your wrist, the glove logo on your wrist, you'll see at address, the logo's kind of pointed toward the target. And then you'll see as they come into impact, when the practice swing, that logo is pointed toward the camera. That club face is wide open. I bet you that's what you'll see a lot of times in your practice swing. So that's the move course where you have to learn how to square up the club face when you get forward shaft lean. So keep in mind that if the swing, it's kind of an optical illusion. The swing looks great. The mechanics and everything look great as far as, maybe the Totsby Golf System and things like that. But the club face, I can almost guarantee you that club face is not square. And you're also probably not focused on getting that ball first contact. Usually when people are taking practice swings, they're just kind of brushing the turf. And most of the time, that turf interaction is happening way before where the golf ball would be, or there's no turf interaction at all. Now, I don't recommend you go out and take a bunch of divots with your practice swings. You don't want to be roughing up the course unless you're hitting a ball or something like that. But that's basically what's going on there. So those are the reasons, and the fix is to get your practice swing to where you're actually squaring up the club face and you're at full speed with it. That's the other thing too. In practice swings, people aren't usually swinging full speed. Usually they're swinging 3/4 of what their normal speed is, or even less than that. So that's kind of the way that goes about it. So the way to fix it is get your practice swing to where you're at full speed with it, and you're squaring up the club face. You're looking at it on camera. You're seeing it. Basically, you're looking at it as if there was a golf ball there. It would be a great shot, and then you can transition to hitting a golf ball by clipping a tee or hitting a piece of paper or a leaf, and then you can add the golf ball and try to replicate that same motion. So usually when I take a practice swing, out on the course, It's just for me to get a feel of what's going on. So, for example, if I'm trying to hit a shot and okay, I want to draw this one, I might take a practice swing where I swing a little bit more into out with a closed face. I might exaggerate that a little bit to help me get the feeling of it, so that when I hit the golf ball, I may have a little bit better results. That's basically what I use a practice swing for. But when you're doing practice swings to change your swing, then you'll want to work through it like the way that I talked about a minute ago. So Leland H says, practice tempo, what method? I'm not really sure what that question means, Leland. If you wouldn't mind reposting that. Can you give me a little bit more? I'm not really sure. Practice tempo, what method? Not really sure exactly what your question is. So John C., what should one focus on when striking the golf ball? Where at the golf ball itself? Where should one be looking with their eyes? So that's a great question, John. Typically, I say the part of the golf ball that you're going to hit, which generally is just going to be the very back of the golf ball. But I'll add a little something to that. So let's say that you are struggling and you're leaving the face open, or you're coming in and leaving the face too much closed. You can focus more. If you're trying to get the club face a little bit more closed because you're leaving the face open, it's good to kind of focus on the outside of the golf ball. So if you're looking at a bird's eye view of the golf ball, you can think about the outside part of the golf ball, because in order to get that club face to where it's closed, you would have to hit the outside part of the golf ball. So this is the very back of the golf ball. This would be to hit the outside part of the golf ball. This face has to be closed. The opposite is true. If you're leaving the face too closed, it might be good to think you're hitting the inside part of the golf ball. So you may be coming in and feeling like you're hitting the inside part of the golf ball to get the face to feel like it's a little bit more open. If I'm trying to hit a fade, I might focus on the inside part of the golf ball a little bit more to ensure I'm coming in with my face open to the path. Or if I'm trying to hit a draw, I might focus on the outside part of the golf ball to help me get that face close to the path. So in general, the very, very back portion of the golf ball is where you want your eyes to be focused. But like I said, if you're trying to close or open the face, focusing on the outside or inside of the bar of the ball, is good too. All right. So Nelson R says, do you do the move also with a pitch shot or chip? So any shot where you're trying to get forward shaft lean, you're doing the move essentially. That part of the move where you're squaring up the club face with forward shaft lean. So if I were to come into impact, it's probably just not something you're going to have to feel as much because there's not as much speed and momentum. But let's say that I set up like this with my chip shots, shaft straight up and down. And, I'm going to need to manipulate that by kind of doing the move in order to, let me angle this down. So I'm going to need to manipulate. So if I set up like this and I want to have forward shaft lean with my chip, I'm going to need to manipulate that club to get it into where I have forward shaft lean and a square club face. You see how I turn that handle to square up the club face and get forward shaft lean? Now, you may set up in this position already, and you may not have to feel like you have to do anything, but you're already kind of pre-doing the move essentially in your chip shot to make that happen. Now, as far as shallowing out the club is concerned, sure, if you're bringing this club down steep, you're going to need to bring this club in a little bit more shallow to hit that ball nicely. If you come down steep like this, you're going to have trouble. You're typically going to flip the club. You're going to chop down into it maybe. So you want to bring that club in nice and shallow whenever you're chipping shots. So yes, to a lesser extent, it's probably something that's going to be a lot easier to do. It's probably something you're already doing. You're probably have the face square with forward shaft lean, and you're just kind of rocking your shoulders back and forth. And when you're doing that, it's probably bringing the club to the inside and nice and shallow. But if you're not, then you may need to feel like you're bringing this club more from the inside and that you're turning this handle down to square the club face. But for most people, you're not already doing that. So Shane, and we'll answer a couple more questions here. We'll stop with John C. But Shane L says, in a sand bunker, how much forward shaft lean? I skipped your first one there. So John C. asks, what's the deal with the miner on the wall? So that's Grubby. That's from the mascot. That's the mascot from the college I went to, South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. We're the Hard Rockers, and that's Grubby, who's the mascot from there. So South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. That's where I have a mechanical engineering degree from. So Shane L says, in a sand bunker, how much forward shaft lean would you have? So a bunker is really the only place, or one of the only places or situations where you do want to flip the club. So basically, you wouldn't want necessarily much forward shaft lean unless you're trying to hit kind of a low, chunk and run type of bunker shot. But in general, your general greenside bunker shots are going to be shots where you do want to come in and kind of actually flip the club through impact. And the reason why you want to do that is to expose more of the bounce on the wedge so that you can allow that club to glide through the sand a little bit more easily and get the good out of the bunker. So you're not really using much forward shaft lean in the bunker unless you're trying to kind of drive the ball and get it to roll out a bunch. So John C. has another question, says, you wouldn't do the move in the sand bunker, would you? So you wouldn't do you do want to shallow out the club. That's very, very important in hitting out of the bunker. You do want to come in very, very shallow, because if you come down steeply like this, what's going to happen is that club's going to be more likely to dig into the sand and get kind of lost into the sand, and you don't want to do that. So you do want to get this club to kind of shallow out a ton to make it a lot easier to glide through the sand and get that ball to come out. So that part of the move, absolutely. But as far as the getting the club to square up with forward shaft lean, that's not something you want to do out of the bunker unless, like I said, with Shane's question, you're trying to hit kind of a driving rollout bunker shot. But if you're trying to hit your standard bunker shot where you're trying to bring it up, land it soft, maybe even with a little bit of spin, not roll out very much, but kind of land near the hole and stop right there, you're going to want to have kind of that flippy motion through there to expose the bounce, make it a little bit easier, allow that club to glide through the sand and get up in the air. So John C. says, shout out to Grubby. Shout out to Grubby. Thanks, John. All right, so we are finished for today. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. I'll be back here Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. So I will see you at that time. Thanks, everybody, for joining me this afternoon, and I will talk to you Monday. Have a great weekend.